your Wednesday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are all having a great day out there today. Tremendous show coming up in a little while here. Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a little bit. Talk Gopher football. Gophers versus Iowa this weekend at Huntington Bank Stadium on Saturday, to be exact. Last year's game ended in a bit of controversy, and that is an understatement. The invalid fair catch signal overturning a late Iowa touchdown. Gophers holding on for a 12-10 win in that game. I don't imagine this one will end up with quite the same amount of drama, but you never know when these two teams meet. You can only probably guess that not a lot of points are going to get scored and that it'll probably be a pretty close game. That is what we are expecting in this one. Randy and I will talk about that more here in just a little bit. Chip Scoggins joins me here in a little bit, too, to talk about his latest Football Across Minnesota feature on Chip Lohmiller, former Gophers football kicker, longtime NFL kicker, now a fire chief up in central northern Minnesota. So stick around for that as well. I got to tell my Chip Lohmiller story. This was our 2-chip challenge right here. 2 chips, 1 show. And so here we go with that in a little while. First, though, what did I miss? Got to start with the Lynx. I know the Twins game was big, and we'll get to that, but man, the Lynx, 30-9 on the season now. Just got done beating New York and now Connecticut. This one in dramatic fashion Tuesday night. Bridget Carleton hitting from deep. I officially said 34 feet. Now, I don't know if it was 34 feet. That was maybe a little bit generous, but 30 feet maybe. Deep 3 with 3-4 seconds left in the game to beat Connecticut 78-76. Lynx lock up the number 2 seed. They're locked into the 2 seed now in the WNBA. New York won, so they've got the 1 seed. Lynx are clear of Connecticut now, so the Lynx are 2, Connecticut is 3. They know they are going to play Phoenix in the first round of the playoffs, which is big because as the 2 seed playing the 7, you avoid the 6 seed, which is going to be the Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark. And you, of course, then get home court in the second round should you advance. And that would be against probably Connecticut, unless, again, Connecticut is upended by Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever in the first round. So a lot of things set by that game. Bigger picture, though, what a season this has been. I put this on Twitter last night. I can't remember many seasons of unexpected success like this in Minnesota sports, right? I tweeted that and people are like, well, what about the Minneapolis Miracle season? Yeah, that's a pretty good example. That's probably the most recent example of a season that just kind of came out of nowhere where you're like, this team has basically no expectations. Even the Wolves coming into this season, you could see them being good. You could see, hey, if Rudy Gobert has a bounce-back season, this should be a 50-plus win team. I don't know if we expected Western Conference Finals, but you could have reasonably expected the Wolves to be a really good team this year. The Lynx were picked to finish in the bottom 4 in a lot of cases of the WNBA. They have Nafisa Collier, of course. People just didn't think much of the supporting cast. They didn't think much of the talent around her. Instead, it's just been this perfect mix of emerging players, complementary role players, great shooting. I mean, I'm guilty of thinking this was going to all fall apart at some point, right? They were shooting so well at the start of the year. And I'm like, well, 3-point shooting is kind of a regressive stat, right? You get hot, you get cold. If you rely too much on threes, it's going to be dangerous. Well, Lynx ended up leading the WNBA, or they are at this point, they probably will for the whole season, leading the WNBA in 3-point shooting percentage. Right now, sitting over 38%, 38.2%. Washington below them, they're a 1.5 below them. That's a pretty big gap for 3-point shooting percentage. So the Lynx are going to be the best 3-point shooting team in the league A, because they have good shooters. B, because of how they space, of how they share the ball, of how they understand how to play as a team. So they've got good shooters. They've got everything kind of funneling around Collier, who's having a tremendous season. Should be an MVP candidate. I don't know if she's going to win. There's a lot of other great players in the league, but she should be a candidate at least this year. So the expectations at the start of the year were, hey, maybe a nice team if they get some things to go well. Maybe could be like a 6 or a 7 seed, compete for a playoff spot. Maybe get better as the year goes on. Instead, they have been one of the 3 best teams in the league all year and now finish as the number 2 seed, 30 wins, most in franchise history. Yeah, there's more games now than there were back in the Dynasty era when you had Maya Moore, Lindsay Whalen, Simone Augustus, all those excellent players, Sylvia Fowles towards the end of that run. Future Hall of Famers, multiple future Hall of Famers on those teams, a lot of those teams. Now they're doing it more with a team effort, more of a, that group played as a team, but they had arguably more talent when you're talking about that many Hall of Famers. This Lynx team doing it more with a complete team effort, doing it more by sharing the ball, by being this excellent group where the sum of the parts, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So what a tremendous season. Unexpected. I didn't expect it. A lot of people didn't expect it. They seemed to be on to something from the jump. I remember talking to Kent Youngblood early in the year thinking, him saying, hey, Cheryl Reeves seems like she likes this team. Watch out for them. And that was proven right this season. But, a lot of coaches, a lot of GMs might say that and, hope, but not really know. This team seems like it has known from the beginning how good they could be, and they have proven it pretty much every night on the court. And now they have a chance to extend that and do something even more special in the playoffs when those begin in just a few days. The Twins, meanwhile, got a significant win in Cleveland on Tuesday night. Much needed after, giving away a game the night before. Griffin Jax, a little bit of redemption after giving up the 2-run home run that was the difference in the 4-3 loss on Monday. He comes back, finishes off a game. A dicey situation in the 9th. Twins are up 4-1 thanks very much to Willie Castro's 2-run insurance home run the inning before. But they still needed to finish things off. Joan Duran trying to pitch a second inning. Couldn't get through the whole thing. They bring in Jax. He gets a couple outs, gets them out of there, gets them into the clubhouse with a 4-1 win. Needed that. Detroit won in extra innings against Kansas City, so Detroit still just a game and a half behind. Detroit has their best pitcher, Trick Skubalt, going tonight. So you got that. So the Twins needed this one. Now the Twins, we keep talking about the Bailey Ober, Pablo Lopez games. Well, they won a Zebby Matthews start, and Zebby pitched pretty well. Almost got through 5 innings, gave up just 1 run, and then it was just a whole committee. Cole Irvin, the new lefty, got an out. Cole Sands pitched. Ronnie Enriquez got pitched. So they kind of ran the gamut of all the relievers that they, somewhere between entirely trust and marginally trust to get the last, 13 outs of that game. That's not always going to work. They're really piecing it together. Man, these relievers have got to be tired. A lot of tight games, a lot of games where the starters just aren't pitching deep, but understanding the moment, I think they did last night, and understanding that when a win is out there to be had at this time of year, you can't mess around. You throw your best arms in the last couple innings, even if they're maybe a little bit tired, even if it means, you get into another tight game tonight, you might not be able to use everybody you want to use tonight. So again, that puts pressure on Bailey Ober. Now, Cleveland's pitching Bibby tonight. That's a pretty good matchup. Opportunity for the Twins. This is the game they should try. Really need to kind of throw everything out there, try to win this game. That would earn at least a split of the series. They've split the first 2 games. They've got 1 more tomorrow before the Twins go to Boston. Now, some other good news on the front here. One, even though Detroit won, Kansas City loses, so the Twins only a game and a half back now of Kansas City for the second of those 3 wild cards. So if Kansas City becomes back into play, then it puts a little less pressure on the Twins to hold off everybody else, because if Kansas City comes back to the pack, 2 spots are open instead of just 1. Seattle lost. Twins up 3 on Seattle now. So that's feeling pretty good, especially because they have the tiebreaker. Boston, free falling. Twins are way up on Boston now, which is good. You want Boston out of the race or feeling like they're out of the race. They've got like a 1% chance of making the playoffs right now. You want them all the way out or feeling like they're all the way out by the time the Twins get to Boston this weekend. Otherwise, that gets dicey. Baltimore, 4 back of the Yankees now. That's significant because Baltimore might not have a ton to play for when the Twins play Baltimore the last series of the year at Target Field. If Baltimore is kind of locked into top wild card position, that could be good for the Twins in terms of, where they're positioning themselves, how much Baltimore is trying to win versus resting players, things like that. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of things to keep in mind. Twins still have 11 games left, and that should include 3 Bailey Ober starts, because think about that. He's pitching tonight. He should pitch one more time later on this week, and then the final game of the season, he would be slated to go. Now, if they kind of get to there and they're already locked in, you could probably rest him, save him for the postseason, things like that, getting way ahead of ourselves. But just saying, you're lined up to have Bailey Ober pitch 3 more times, Pablo Lopez pitch 2 more times, trying to kind of coax the rest of that out of your young rotation, out of your young pitchers, trying to figure out how you're going to get to the finish line. But this one is a big one tonight. We talked about that. They all feel big right now, but you gotta be competitive. You got to give yourself a chance to win in the starts where your veterans are pitching. That's what's going to happen tonight. Detroit's got a good chance to win. Cleveland's throwing a good pitcher too. So this is a big night. This will be a big potential swing in one way or the other in how this race is going to shake out. It's Iowa week for the Gopher football team. Randy Johnson joins me here. Randy, you were in Iowa City last year for the invalid fair catch game, as
sure was.
Iowa might call it. I don't know what the Gophers call it. They just call it a win. And one that they enjoyed immensely. 12-10 last year. Obviously, the Cooper DeJean return punt for a touchdown negated by a fair catch signal that was deemed to be invalid. Different interpretations of that rule still seem to abound, do they not?
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially listening to Kirk Ferentz, the Iowa coach, afterward. Obviously, rightfully upset about it. He was upset even like a month later when they he was asked after they beat Nebraska to get to 10 wins. He goes, "Well, it really should be 11," that type of thing. And He was irked mainly to the fact that when the replay started, when he was explained that they were checking to see if he stepped out of bounds. So it went from that to now they checked on the invalid fair catch signal, which turns out that was by the book. They went with that. It just was pretty tough for Iowa fans to take after they had just looked like they had figured out another way to pull off something to beat the Gophers.
This game probably won't come down to that, but if you look at, predictions, if you look at lines, over, under, stuff like that, wouldn't be surprising if it was close and low scoring again this year, right?
Yeah, they're very much so. It's these teams have played some very tight games, and it's come down to the wire recently. We all remember 2 years ago, it looks like Muhammad Ibrahim is going to will the Gophers into the end zone on his back on this long drive, and then Iowa's All-America linebacker Jack Campbell knocks the ball loose from him as he's about to get a first down real tight in there, and Iowa recovers, goes down and ends up scoring, and basically puts it away, gets another interception late. It's one that the Gophers they found a way to avoid the hex last year, winning with 4 field goals, no touchdowns. So it can be a pretty low scoring game, and one that you look at Iowa's offense, maybe a little better than it was last year under Brian Ferentz. They have new coordinator in Tim Lester, but it's slowed down a little bit. They have a very good running back in Caleb Johnson, who's got 3 consecutive 100-yard games. So it's both teams you might see a little bit more passing out of the Gophers this year. They seem to have to pass a little bit to set up the run, but I don't expect fireworks in the scoreboard.
No, and Gophers have shut out 2 straight opponents, Rhode Island and Nevada. Maybe not as impressive as when they did it the last time 60 plus years ago against a couple of Big Ten teams, but still probably showing that this is a pretty good side of the ball right now. They got playmakers, up and down each level of the defense. What stood out to you the most in the shutout against Nevada?
I thought it was kind of the versatility that they showed. They had several players making plays. The line up front got a good pressure. You had Kerry Brown getting 2 interceptions thanks to that pressure. Then you had Jack Henderson, another safety, coming on a blitz, getting a big hit. You just had a lot of different parts came together and played well. It was not one person doing so, and it was interesting to see. It was just kind of a group effort.
Nevada's quarterback coming into that game had a fair amount of success this year, although not against the Gophers in the past, because as you reminded me, he was also Colorado's quarterback a few years ago when the Gophers also earned a shutout win. So maybe he's probably done seeing Minnesota, but that piece of it was probably impressive because I thought Nevada was supposed to be able to score on them, and they just didn't.
Yeah, Nevada had run the option pretty well with Brendan Lewis, the quarterback, and it just the Gophers got on him early and just didn't let up, didn't let them get much room, put enough pressure on them in the passing game where they were and get the lead on them, and kind of make them play left-handed.
Max Brosmer looks a lot more comfortable, looks like he's, figuring some things out, especially, relative to the first game of the season against North Carolina. How much of that is familiarity with the system, kind of getting a few games under his belt versus quality of opponent in terms of how he's progressed this year?
Yeah, I think, you got to put a little bit in each column there, but I think he has settled down. I think he was a little bit maybe a little jittery to start that North Carolina game. He came around pretty well in the second half of that game, especially the fourth quarter when he led a couple scoring drive situation where he got him in line to kick the winner, but they just didn't make it. I think he showed the last 2 weeks that he doesn't necessarily have to have a favorite target. He'll spread it around. Against Rhode Island, he found 9 different pass catchers. It was 6 this weekend. Against Nevada, it doesn't just have to be Daniel Jackson, although I'm sure the Gophers want to get him going. They had him open for a deep one and just didn't connect. The other nice thing that they're doing is they're getting it to Darius Taylor on the backfield, so that helps out the run game where they can loosen that defense up a little bit.
It does seem like PJ Fleck is committing to the pass a little bit more, just like Kevin O'Connell is committing to the run a little bit more on the other side of things, and both of them have found some success with that. Do you think that he's fully committed on that? He get into a tight game against Iowa. Is he going to let Max Brosmer cut it loose? Was this a matter of, hey, it's going well and there's not a whole lot to lose here. It's okay to let him do this against Rhode Island and Nevada. And frankly, in past years, he hasn't really done that. They've just kind of kept it buttoned up. So maybe this is a philosophical shift. I still want to see it. What about you?
I would say he probably has right now more trust in Max Brosmer, and obviously than last year with Ethan Kelly McManus, and then maybe even a little bit so with the last couple of years with Tanner Morgan. 19 with Tanner Morgan, he had all kinds of trust because he's throwing Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman just tons of slants up and down the field. This year, I think PJ's going to use what works. When handing the ball to Mo Ibrahim was grinding out a couple hundred yards a game, that worked, so they stayed with it. Now, the detriment to that was the passing game didn't develop as they would have liked it to. This year, I think he realizes, him and Greg Harbaugh Jr. that they have a quarterback who can make some throws. So they're going to use him more.
North Carolina game felt like it was magnified because of just losing your first game of the year, losing a game that was right there for you, even if it's kind of a toss-up game. This feels like the same thing. And like we've talked about, Randy, there's a lot of these types of games on the schedule. They become magnified now that it's the Big Ten. You've got a bunch of tough games coming up after this. where do you put this one? Not, rivalry wise, obviously it's important, but where do you put this in the importance meter for kind of the rest of this season and how it could go?
Well, it's a home game against a rival. It's a rival you beat last year. I think this is one where the Gophers got to look at it and say, hey, they need this one. The schedule sets up toughly, and especially the stretch here, the 3-week stretch here with this game, then at Michigan, and then USC at Huntington Bank Stadium. So yeah, if you want to win anyone you can, and this is one that would be very important. It shows that last year wouldn't be just a fluke. It can show that okay, they're serious about making their mark in the Big Ten this year. It's that's where you'll want to see what they can do against a good running back on defense. They had some trouble with Omarion Hampton against North Carolina. They couldn't get off the field in the second half. Against Caleb Johnson, they're gonna need to get him on the sideline.
Is that the biggest key to you? Maybe we could finish off there. Like, if the Gophers are going to win, what needs to happen for them?
Yeah, I think they need to do a good job on both sides of the line of scrimmage. It's Iowa has a very veteran and very good offensive line. They're showing that right now with they're running the ball. Their defensive line has always been one that's been tough to get blocks on. They're always long and rangy, and they play well together. They got a very good linebacker in Higgins. Very good defensive backs, Castro being one of them. It's a very good defense, and the Gophers need to be able to somehow impose some offensive will on them.
What if this game also comes down to something weird? Like, we got to be ready for everything, right? Like last year, you couldn't have known what was coming your way, but what if it comes down to something weird again?
Yeah, it probably will. It just seems, I go back to my days at the Minnesota Daily in 1990. I'm covering the regular season finale. Has already clinched the Big Ten championship and are going to the Rose Bowl. The finale was at the Metrodome, and this is back in the days when offensive teams could ask for relief from the official if the crowd got too loud.
Yeah.
So this was in the Dome early in the second half. The Gophers have a lead, but they're backed up in the shadow of their own end zone. And the quarterback at that time, Markel Fleetwood, had to ask the official for a timeout, basically, because the Iowa crowd was too wild. It was making too much of a racket. So that's one of the things. Okay, this thing is. This rivalry is kind of odd, and they're playing for a pig, and then later in the Dome, Iowa wins, takes the goalpost out of the Dome. You've had some other shenanigans happen in that
yes,
place. So it's it's something. These teams get together, and hilarity ensues sometimes.
It does indeed. Well, we'll see what's to be written in this next chapter. Follow Randy's coverage, of course, Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. Randy, we'll talk again next week to see how this goes and set up next week as well.
Sounds good, Mike.
Great stuff from Randy. In case you're wondering, yes, Kirk Ferentz is still getting asked almost a year later about that controversial play at the end of the game. Here was Kirk Ferentz this week, Iowa head coach, still getting asked and talking about the play that determined last year's 12-10 Gophers victory.
I really don't want to go down that road again too much, but probably the biggest, and I go back to Michigan, I think it was 06. We were up there, and there was like a 6-minute review, 7-minute review, and that's where the issue starts to come into play. And then, when you're told we're reviewing one thing, and then we get a different interpretation about something else. But those lacks of communication, or that lack of communication, I think is a little disturbing afterwards. And I do think we addressed that in the out of season as a conference. I think we're in a better place right now. And, bottom line, there's still, I think that play was open for interpretation, but it was more about the process afterwards. It was really kind of troubling.
Again, I don't expect this year to come down to something quite as crazy, but you never know, and it would be hilarious if there was some sort of invalid fair catch that was invoked in this game as well. Let's talk football across Minnesota today with Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist. Chip, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mikey. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. this might be the only time we ever talk about another Chip on this show. Chip Lohmiller is the subject of FAM this week. Obviously, former Gophers kicker, long NFL career, and now what is he up to?
Now and I can't pass up a chance to write about another Chip, obviously.
No.
But yes, Chip Lohmiller. I think most Minnesotans know him as Chip Lohmiller, the kicker. All Big Ten kicker for the Gophers, hit a 62-yarder against Iowa back in 1986. All-Pro kicker at Washington NFL, won a Super Bowl with Washington here at the Metrodome, actually. But now he is Chief Lohmiller. He is fire chief of Cross Lake, Minnesota, up in the Brainerd Lakes area. He when he retired from football in '96, he went almost immediately into firefighting. His dad was a fireman years ago, actually before he was born, and he felt that calling too. And he sort of was trying to figure out what he wanted to do post-football career. He became a head coach at Pequot Lakes High School and led them to a state tournament a couple times. He started a property management company, but he really started out as a volunteer firefighter and just stayed with it, loved it, said he has a passion for it like he did football, and he's worked his way up to where now he's the fire chief in Cross Lake, and he has 25 paid on-call volunteers, so he's pretty busy.
Yeah, that's pretty unusual, right? Like I can't think of another case of hearing about that is the post-football career for somebody.
Yeah, and he's he grew up here in Woodbury, was an all-state kicker in Woodbury, but when he was in college, he had a teammate that had a cabin up in that area, in Cross Lake area, and a couple times they'd go up there in the summers or whatever, and he kind of fell in love with it. And his second season in the NFL, he came back and they were going up there again, and his friend said, "Hey, by the way, that property there is for sale." And so Chip bought the property and would spend his off seasons there, and so he resettled there once he got done playing football. That became his permanent home, and like he said, his dad was a firefighter, and I think it was just something he was kind of called to. And once he got involved with it, he said two things are kind of the commonalities that he found from his football career. One, the adrenaline rush, and two, the team aspect. And those two aspects really were, prominent there in football and as a football player, as an athlete, and now as a firefighter and fire chief. And so it kind of spoke to him, and he started his own company where he trains firefighters around the country, around Minnesota. I apologize. So he has 54 instructors, and he's in his truck a lot. He goes around. He said in the wintertime when there's more opportunities for do it, him and his instructors have training seminars, 30 to 40 a week, all around the state. And so he's training, a large number of the firefighters coming into that that vocation.
That's great. And you mentioned his 62-yarder against Iowa. I just happen to have that queued up.
This will be a 62-yard field goal attempt with David Williams holding for him.
This place will come apart, even if it's close. I'll tell you, he got it.
Look at it. It is good!
Unbelievable.
Now, funny story. I did a story on Chip Lohmiller when he became, I think, the Pequot Lakes head coach in the mid-2000s. I was doing that for the old page 2 at the Star Tribune, and I happened to be up there. We've got some family. My wife's got some family up in the Brainerd, Pequot Lakes area, so we went up there. Yeah. I arranged an interview to talk to him up there in person, and we arranged it to meet at it was a restaurant bar kind of in the area, and it happened to be when the Gophers Michigan game was on in 2005, and Gophers win that game on a last-second field goal. I'm trying to remember who the kicker was for the Gophers at the time.
Jason Gianni.
Is that who it was?
Gianni.
Okay, and
is that right? Yeah, I think so.
I can't remember who it was. That might be it. It was somebody. I can't remember. It was the game that I think Big Gary Russell sets up the game on field goal, and it was I'm sitting there with Chip Lohmiller, who was the last kicker to beat Michigan with a last-second field goal for the Gophers before that. And I'm just like, wait a minute, did you just see that? Like we're sitting, so I ended up doing like a separate piece on the coincidence of sitting with Chip Lohmiller. Had nothing to do with the reason we were talking. It just happened to be while we were there talking. So he was a good dude.
That Iowa. Sorry to interrupt you. That Iowa kick came a week after the Michigan kick. So
is that right? Yeah, it was the same year. I didn't realize it was right after that. But good dude. I'm glad to hear he is having such an impact in his post football life. Chip, really quick, what else was in FAM? Who got your game balls this week? What else
game balls this week. Blake Cashman, unbelievable yesterday. Vikings linebacker. He was everywhere, made plays everywhere. Darius Taylor, Gopher running back, showed his versatility, had an 80-yard run that really broke that game over. Nick Thien, Pine Island. How about this guy? 4 total touchdowns. He had a kickoff return, 96-yard kickoff return, 2 running touchdowns. He caught a touchdown pass. And let's give it up for Drew Habner, the Morris High quarterback. He threw 5 touchdown passes Friday night to set a new school record there for career touchdown passes. He has 47, so congratulations to him.
Very nice. Actually took the family out. We saw some Friday Night Lights this week, went to the Egan Rosemount game. Egan looked pretty good. Egan's pretty good, so watch out for them this year. They looked really good down in Rosemount. Fun atmosphere. It was like packed, beautiful night, sunset in the background. It was everything you could want for on a Friday fall night. It's going to get chillier. It's not has not been chilly for a football Friday yet, but it's going to get chillier. And Chip Scoggins, appreciate it. Keep reading Chip's stuff, the FAM column every week, football across Minnesota. Chip, we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, thanks, Mikey.
Really good talking to Chip Scoggins, proving that there is room for 2 Chips in this world, in this segment. Chip Scoggins on Chip Lohmiller. Hope you enjoyed that. Let's finish with the cooler. I kind of wish this story had come out before I talked to Chip Scoggins, because this would have been right up his alley. College sports, Tennessee Volunteers. They're upping ticket prices 10% across the board next year for their football. All sports, actually. The 10% talent fee on tickets to help pay athletes as part of a new revenue-sharing plan set to begin in 2025. Reading right now directly from the ESPN story. They're being transparent about it. They're saying, hey, we're going to have to pay upwards of $20 million a year to pay players starting next year. We are tacking on a fee, 10% to all tickets to help defray that cost. This shouldn't be surprising. It caught my eye, but it shouldn't be surprising. Anytime there is a change in how business is done, in terms of how expensive things are getting, you can bet that the cost will be passed on to the consumer. That if you're going to find out how to pay for things that you now want, that you didn't used to have or didn't used to need, the surest way that places are going to find to do that is by passing on the cost to their loyal customers. Tennessee doing just that. Their football attendance is over 100,000 a game. Their total attendance this year up over 700,000 for just football. Add a 10% fee to 700,000 tickets. You are going to have a pretty hefty sum already to help pay for, NIL, things like that, the new world of college athletics. So wonder if this will become a model. Maybe it only works in places where the fan base is a little bit more diehard, a little bit more rabid, a little bit more willing to pay whatever it costs to get in the door. But Tennessee's had a ton of all sports success lately and going all in on this right now in this moment. That will do it for me today. Lavelle Eniel III expected to join me tomorrow. Star Tribune columnist. We will do our daily delivery debate. 3 topics. A lot of disagreement. I can feel it coming up this week already. So join us tomorrow for that. Those will also be on the Star Tribune YouTube page. So check that out if you prefer to see it instead of just listening to it. Until tomorrow, I am Michael Rand. Back at it then.